All right, let's talk about a battle that Winston Churchill himself called the dominating factor of the entire Second World War. This is the story of the Battle of the Atlantic, and how in just 8 weeks, the hunters, the dreaded U-boats, became the hunted.
So here's the big question, right? In March of 1943, things looked really bad for the Allies. I mean, they were genuinely afraid the U-boats could cost them the whole war. But then, by the end of May, everything had flipped. The U-boats were running for their lives. How did that happen so fast? Well, it's an incredible story of tech, tactics, and intelligence, all clicking into place at the exact same time.
To really get how wild this turnaround was, you first have to understand just how dominant the German U-boat fleet was. In early 1943, they were, without a doubt, the absolute masters of the Atlantic.
For years, Admiral Dönitz and his U-boats had been fighting what they called a tonnage war, basically sink enough ships to starve Britain out of the fight. And the U-boat crews called the early days the happy times, because sinking ships was just easy. By March 1943, they were at their absolute peak, sinking so many ships that the Allies were at a breaking point.
You gotta love this quote from Churchill. It just perfectly captures the stakes of this thing. He knew that language was a weapon. See, our boats are submarines. They're noble and gallant. Their boats are U-boats. They're dastardly villains. It's brilliant propaganda because in a war for survival, there's no room for gray areas.
The U-boat threat was so real that in January 1943, at the Casablanca Conference, the Allies made a huge call. The invasion of Europe, it's on hold. They knew there was no way they could build up forces in Britain for an invasion if their supply ships were getting picked off one by one in the Atlantic. Job number one had to be winning that battle.
Okay, so let's look at how the Allies responded. Because what turned the tide wasn't one single magic bullet. It wasn't one piece of secret technology. It was a whole toolbox of new gear, new strategies, and new thinking, all coming together at once.
What's so cool here is how all this tech worked together. It created this layered defense, this inescapable net. You had ultra-intelligence, from cracking the German Enigma codes, which gave you a pretty good idea of where the U-boat wolf packs were. But then, as they got closer, new 10-centimeter radar could spot them on the surface, even at night. And if they dove underwater, well, that's when ASDIC, or sonar, could hear them.
And then there was this, HFDF, nicknamed Huff-Duff. This was the real game changer. See, the German Wolfpack tactic depended on U-boats constantly radioing each other to coordinate their attacks. Huff-Duff let Allied ships get an instant fix on where those radio signals were coming from, so the U-boat's greatest tool, communication, suddenly became their biggest weakness. It literally turned Allied escort ships from defenders into hunters.
And from the Allied side of things, finally being able to fight back. I mean, it must have been incredible. You can just feel the sheer power in this sailor's description of watching a depth charge go off. It's almost beautiful.
But then, you flip the coin. For the German sailors inside that steel tube, hundreds of feet down, it was absolute, terrifying chaos. The same event, viewed from two completely different worlds. One sees a fantastic light show. The other hears a sound so loud he thinks he'll never hear again.
And like I said, it wasn't just about the new gadgets. The Allies also got smarter. They used science, operational research, to figure out that bigger convoys were actually safer. And that was huge, because it freed up escort ships to form their own mobile support groups, basically dedicated hunter-killer teams. And critically, they finally got enough very long-range bombers to close that infamous mid-Atlantic air gap, which had been a safe playground for U-boats for years.
So, the stage is set. The Allies have this whole new toolbox of tech and tactics. And in May of 1943, everything comes to a head in one of the most dramatic and decisive months of the entire war.
The battle over Convoy SC-130 is the perfect example of how this all played out. German intelligence spotted this convoy, and they sent a massive force, 25 U-boats, to ambush it. They were expecting another easy victory, a real turkey shoot.
But the result was a complete shock. The Allied escorts, using their radar and Huff-Duff, went on the attack before the U-boats could even get organized. Planes hammered them from above. In the end, 3 U-boats were sunk, including one with Admiral Dönitz's own son on board. And the convoy? It lost 0 ships, not one. The hunters had officially become the hunted.
And SC-130 wasn't a fluke. For the entire month of May, the losses were just staggering. 41 U-boats were destroyed. Let that sink in. That was nearly a quarter of Germany's entire operational U-boat fleet, gone, in just 31 days. It's no wonder the Germans called it Black May.
The losses were just They were unsustainable. There was no way to keep going like this. So on May 24th, Admiral Dönitz had to make the call. He ordered all U-boats to pull back from the North Atlantic. He was, in effect, admitting defeat.
So why did it all fall apart so fast? Well, it wasn't just about what the Allies were doing right. It was also about some critical weaknesses on the German side that the Allies were now perfectly equipped to exploit.
I mean, at the end of the day, the Germans were fighting blind. They had no idea about the new Allied radar or Huff-Duff. Their own tactics forced them to use the radio all the time, which basically just gave away their position. And they had no defense against Allied planes dominating the sky. It was a fatal combination.
And I love this analogy from an Allied report because it nails another huge problem for Germany. Sure, Dönitz had more U-boats at sea than ever before. But his best crews, the experienced aces from the happy times, they were mostly gone. Now he was sending out rookies. So he had 50 hunters instead of one. But the Bears? Well, the Bears weren't too worried.
And the numbers here, they just tell the whole story. Look at this. In 1940, the average U-boat commander had 2 years of experience. By 43, it's down to 8 months. And the results? The average amount of shipping sunk per U-boat per day dropped from 430 tons to just 65. The U-boat force was bigger, sure, but it was way less deadly.
So that U-boat withdrawal in May 1943, it wasn't just a tactical retreat. You could argue it was the single most important strategic turning point of the war in Europe up to that time. It secured the Allied path to victory.
And here's the real takeaway. Winning this battle made everything else possible. Suddenly, the Atlantic wasn't a killing ground anymore. It became a massive highway, pouring all the soldiers, tanks, and supplies needed for the D-Day invasion into Britain, totally safe from attack.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty chilling thought. For those 2 months, it really could have gone either way. What if that combination of tech and tactics hadn't worked? What if the U-boats had won? Britain might have been forced to surrender, the invasion of Europe would have been impossible, and our world today, well, it would look completely different.